Thank you for listening to this Podcast One production. Now available on Apple Podcasts, Podcast One, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
On this episode of Killer Genes.
So they X-ringed him. I mean, it was just almost a dead center, bullseye.
A Texas beer mogul is shot dead at his own front door.
And the victim has some chilling last words.
And I've been told Ash's last words to be, "They got me. I'm dead."
Who killed Ash Rowell?
The following episode of Killer Genes contains graphic and sensitive information and material. Listener discretion is advised.
Emmy-nominated true crime journalists bring you cases like you've never heard them before. Hear first-hand accounts from the victims' families, private investigators, lawyers, law enforcement, and even the convicted. Giving you a complete 360 of the case like no one else can.
I'm Melissa McCarty.
I'm Kelly McClear.
And this is Killer Genes.
Ash Rowell was a 35-year-old father of three. He was devoted to his family and his love of craft beers. Living in an affluent suburb of Houston, Texas, Ash was making a name for himself in the beverage business. But he never lost sight of his giving nature.
Ash was always a real jovial character. Everybody liked Ash.
Charlotte Rowell remembers her son fondly, as any devoted mother would.
She was kind and considerate and loving. Really, even as a child, really tender-hearted and cared about other people. He was one of those kids who always at Christmas time wanted to go give toys for kids that didn't have any toys, and then as an adult he continued doing the same thing. In fact, right before he died, every Christmas he would dress up like Santa and go to the Children's Hospital in Houston and give out gifts to the kids that were stuck there over Christmas. So, and I remember a couple of Christmas, I talked to him afterwards and he'd get tears in his eyes. So he's real kind-hearted, real generous, really giving person. Just the best son growing up. We had a really wonderful growing up period with Ash, and then when he became a father, he just absolutely loved and adored and lived for his kids.
But Ash Rowell would not live to see his kids grow up. He was gunned down at his own front door on February 1st, 2013. So what happened on February 1st of 2013?
My husband and I were walking home from dinner. I think it was probably around 7:30. It was starting to get dark. And we walked past Ash's house, and I said, maybe we should go in and just say hello. And then I thought, no, it's bedtime. And I thought, they're probably getting the kids ready for bed. We won't bug them. We can talk in the morning. I saw the fire truck and the paramedics go by. And I went out in the front yard because they were on a street and we're a very close neighborhood, and it stopped in front of Ash's house. So I told my husband I'd be right back. My husband was in the later throes of Alzheimer's, and so he wasn't really, I had just picked him up at the memory care center and brought him home for dinner that night. I was planning on taking him back in a little bit, and I just said, don't leave, I'll be back. I need to go check on something. And walking down the sidewalk, the next door neighbor of Ash came out, and I said, Eric, what on earth? And he said, you need to get in there fast because it's not good. And I thought somebody had gotten hurt really badly, but I walked to the front door, and it was wide open, and there was blood everywhere. And I looked over, and I saw Ash lying over in the office. They had like a living room, and then there was a family room where Leslie had her office, and I saw him lying on the floor, and I went to go to him, and one of the paramedics came and stopped me and said, you don't need to go there. And I said, I'm his mother. Let me get to him. And he said, no. And that's when he said he's gone. And, you know, so when somebody tells you they can't believe those words, you just can't. You cannot grasp. Your mind won't let you. So I turned, and Leslie was there, and she was hysterical. And I just said, what happened? What happened? And she said, he was cleaning the front closet. He was cleaning the closet by the front door. I think the shotgun went off. I said, Leslie, there's no shotgun in the closet. I mean, they had a lot. Of course, their weapons were locked. They had small kids in the house. And I just remember her just saying, my life is over. My life is over.
Phil Waters spent 30 years in law enforcement and 25 of those years with the Houston Police Department as a homicide detective. Waters is considered one of the nation's top interrogators, even landing himself a series on Investigation Discovery called The Interrogator. In 2013, Waters and his partner Brian Harris were assigned to the murder of Ash Rowell.
So we ended up getting involved in it because it became, for lack of a better term, it was a whodunit to begin with, and it became rather complicated early on because to the degree that Ash, the incident itself, certainly lent itself to a hit, for lack of a better term, again. And it was a one-shot deal, standing in his doorway at his house, and his wife and their children, and a neighborhood child was over there for a pizza party. And Ash had just come home, and apparently had presumably, been in the shower, had a pair of gym shorts on, and was just going to, relax with the party with the kids. And he, for whatever reason, don't know if it was a doorbell, knock on the door, somebody got his attention, whatever it was, but he answered the front door, and one shot X-ringed him, and he walked into the kitchen dining area where the kids were and where Leslie was, fell on the floor, bleeding, and made some comment to the effect that they shot me, or they killed me, or they've done this to me. But we were never able to determine. Now, this is according to Leslie, and flash forward, we were never able to determine, who they was or who that person was.
Charlotte remembers the moment she learned just what happened to Ash from Detectives Waters and Harris.
When Brian Harris came down, I said, what happened? And he said he opened the front door and somebody shot him directly in the heart. And he said, you usually have a minute and a half to 2 minutes when you get wounded like that. The brain still has enough oxygen that you are aware, you are still conscious, and you know what happened. And supposedly, I think this came out later, that, of course, Leslie heard the noise and went to Ash, and Ash was still alert and knew what was happening. And I've been told by Brian Harris and Phil Waters that Leslie reported Ash's last words to be, "They got me. I'm dead." And they both have suggested to me that most of the time a person that they know they're dying, they make some kind of affirmation as to who got them, not just they got me. So I think they were concerned about that, that if somebody's come to your front door, and Ash was he was, he has pajama bottoms on, and I don't believe he had a top on, and I don't believe he would have opened the front door to someone in that state of undress unless he knew them.
Before Detective Waters can get to a suspect lineup, there was the issue of the crime scene itself. On the evening of Ash's murder, can you kind of paint the picture for us and set the stage a little bit?
Now, the caliber of the weapon has never been released, so I'm not gonna talk about that. But suffice to say, we've never found. We've heard talk about a gun, but we've never, we obviously never found the weapon. But and that was the only evidence that we had, was firearms evidence. Now, there was a witness, a neighbor, who just immediately after the shot was fired, that had looked out the window and, according to their description, had seen a dark-colored, probably a sedan, four-door, driving away at what they would call high speed or that kind of thing. Now, the problem with that is that of course we don't know if that car had anything to do with anything, but we have to presume that it may have, and having no license plate or anything else to determine what that specific car was, then it was just kind of another fact that was put into the big pile, but we didn't really derive any affirmative link to the crime scene.
While nondescript, this dark sedan would be a key piece of evidence in Ash's death. He said they didn't identify a person familiar or didn't look familiar, so either his brain, after being shot, didn't work to where he was naming a name, or he didn't know the people. But again, why would he open the door if he didn't recognize the faces at night? Did you hear the shot?
No, I did not. No. The neighbors across the street did, and they reported when they looked at their kitchen window, they heard the noise. I'm not sure they were able to identify it as a gunshot at that point, but they looked out and they saw someone run from the front door to this dark sedan car. And there was a driver, so somebody was waiting in the car. There was a driver and a shooter. There's something that's very positive here, and that is that we know from eyewitnesses that there were two people that night involved in Ash's murder. So those two people are somewhere in Houston, Texas, or maybe who knows where they've gone to now, but they know, and if they're still alive, they've talked to somebody else. So if they were hired to kill Ash, sooner or later, somebody's going to say something.
And Charlotte is still bothered by how Ash's murder took place.
How can somebody walk up to your front door on a Friday night in a neighborhood where people are walking? I mean, obviously they watched, and then they took their best shot, literally speaking.
Literally.
But somebody could have popped up. Somebody could have ridden down the street at that moment, and it was not even completely dark yet. It was like twilight.
It's a pretty ballsy execution. Did Ash know his killer or killers? Detective Waters knew he would have a challenging case of whodunit ahead of him. I assume you and Detective Harris at the time created a victimology of Ash. What did you guys learn about him?
Well, right. That's we have to do that for every person. We want to know what their background is. We want to know, because this up front, there was no particular explanation as to why someone would do this to this guy. He was a craft beer. He was in the craft beer business with his mother, and the mother and the father. The father at the time had Alzheimer's, and they lived 2 doors down from them when this happened. And there was nothing to indicate that, there's a danger in the craft beer business. And until you start to peel the onion back and, eventually certain aspects of a person's life start to stink. And that's what we found with Ash. So we found that there were some conflicts within the business between Ash and his wife's brothers, or a brother that was working for the company. there had been a series of lawsuits between that person and Charlotte and Ash and the company and so forth and so on. And it looked like there was a lot of hostility in that particular area.
Do you love listening to this podcast? Well, we love that you are here to listen.
Do you ever wonder what it's like to create a listening experience like this week to week?
Do your friends always tell you that you should have a podcast?
Well, now is your chance. Our podcast network, Podcast One, is looking for the next podcast star. Think it could be you?
If so, enter the Self-Made Podcast Competition now to find out. And all you have to do is visit launchpad1.com/selfmade for a chance to win a contract with Podcast One. And it's valued at over $100,000 in promotion and so much more.
That's a lot. Okay, so enter now until September 3rd and tell all of your friends to listen and download. Go to launchpad1.com/selfmade to find out more, see official rules, and sign up for your chance to win.
That's launchpad1.com/selfmade.
Was it a murder for hire, or did Ash know the person at the other end of the barrel? One thing is for sure, Ash was the target of an assassination.
To learn about Ash and what may have led to his death, you have to learn about the nature of the family business. Charlotte Rowell, Ash's mother, was the owner of one of the largest wine and spirits distribution and importation companies in Texas, Duff Beer and McDuff Imports. Ash was murdered in February of 2013, but a series of events just a few years earlier would possibly play a role in his murder.
Ash had a law degree, and he had been in and out of some internships that he wasn't really happy with. And he said, I really like to work in the family business. So he came into our business, and Ash was never an owner of Duff Beer. Duff Beer was a subsidiary of our larger company, McDuff Imports, at the time. But he was very adamant about that. He said, I want to build this company, and then we can build it to a certain stage. And I believe that with craft beers doing as well as they're doing in the current market, that at some point in the future, we'll have a nice company and we'll probably be able to sell it.
And sell it they did, making a significant profit. But not before Charlotte and Ash had a falling out with one of their employees, Brian Lam, the brother of Ash's wife, Leslie. And what happened when he stopped working for you guys in 2009? I understand his relationship with Duff kind of soured and started to go south.
It did. There were some bookkeeping discrepancies that I didn't care for. And I warned Brian and asked him to not do that again. And it continued. So I finally just told Brian he was going to have to leave the company. He was not performing as he should be. He was not producing anything, and had gotten some of the other employees upset with his way of handling things. And then the financial situation, the issues that we had there with the bookkeeping were just not acceptable. So on the second warning, I just told him that he needs to leave the company, and he was very, very hostile.
Are you saying that he was stealing money, or could you elaborate on what you didn't like about the bookkeeping?
There were some loans that were made to the company from Brian, and then the money was taken back out of the account shortly after that. So that wasn't, we never asked for a loan from Brian. So it was not what you call GAAP bookkeeping. It was just not what you want your books to look like. That should never happen. And so I asked him not to put any more money through our account.
And what was Brian's reaction to being terminated?
Brian turned around and sued the company and myself and Ash, saying that he had part ownership in the company, which was laughable because, again, you don't own any kind of beverage distribution company in Texas unless you have a license to distribute beer, wine, and spirits. And my husband and myself were the only holders of those licenses ever, so Brian Lam, ergo, could not have been an owner in Dash. Ash was never an owner, so why would Brian have been?
But Brian Lam felt he was owed more after being terminated, and during the lawsuit, depositions were taken of both Brian and Ash. So during this lawsuit, there was depositions, correct? With Brian
Yes.
Lam and with Ash. What happened during those depositions?
Brian he was very arrogant, I guess would be a good word, with facial expressions. And during one specific, when I was given my deposition, he kept putting his wrists together, like basically you're going to be locked up, like handcuffs, going to jail. And I finally had to stop and just say, I'm not going to continue to talk until you control your client, to his attorney. And then when Ash was giving his deposition, Brian took his forefinger and pulled it across his throat, like as if you're maybe threatening to cut someone's throat.
Mr. Rowell, could you state your name for the record, please?
Ashley Scott Rowell.
I'm Marty Hill, or Martin Hill, and I, along with Philip Braxton from my office, represent Brian Lam in this litigation. I think you understand that, but I want to make sure for the record.
So, Melissa, Charlotte provided us with a copy of Ash's deposition video, and I'd like to play a couple of minutes for you. This first one happened about 1 hour and 45 minutes into Ash's deposition.
Excuse me, counselor. I think your client's videotaping me.
I doubt it. We're videotaping it right there.
Well, yeah, but that's his personal video camera.
We're already videotaping it, so if you want a copy of the videotape, we're going to get a copy. You can have a copy, too, if you want.
All right.
So there's no need. He's looking at his phone as far as I know, but I don't really care. There's no need to do that, or to have ugly looks back and forth, as I understand what's going on the other day.
He's already threatened me 3 times today by motioning that he was going to cut my neck. I've been threatened before, and I feel that he might be taking video to send to someone else. So,
non-responsive. Who is he sending a video to?
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
It's stunning for me because his life was taken execution style in a premeditated, seemingly professional hit. And this, to me, is a clear path for police to now question Brian Lam as a suspect. This is motive.
Now, this next clip is in reference to when Brian was let go from Duff Beer.
A moment ago, we talked about the possible physical threats that you felt were being thrust upon you by either my client or I guess his relatives or acquaintances. Is that, you recall that conversation?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody specifically ever make a threat against you by Brian Lam himself, or anyone on behalf of Brian Lam make a threat against you directly?
Yes.
Who was that?
Mr. Lam.
Brian Lam?
Yes.
Okay. When was that?
Beginning of June 2010.
Okay. What did he say?
He said, if you get rid of me, bad things will happen to you and your business.
That doesn't sound like a physical threat. Or did you take it as a physical threat?
I took it as a physical threat.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes.
What else?
My wife has received 2 text messages.
Okay. One of those was produced during Brian Lam's deposition?
Yes.
And what, you remember the rough description in that?
I know I'm going to get your husband and his mom. They can't hide from me.
Okay, the one that said you can't hide.
Yes.
Okay. And that was actually by Rick Lam, is that right?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
January or February. January, I want to say, of 2011.
Now, this is more than enough for the Lam brothers, all of them, to be interrogated, and that hasn't happened. It's chilling how many threats, multiple times, to take this man's life, to him directly, to his wife, the Lam brothers' sister, and detectives don't think this is a motive for murder. I think they're just being very lackluster in their efforts to lock down proper interrogations.
Hey, Killer Genes listeners and fans. Now, we know that you love a good mystery as much as we do. So, we want to tell you about a free-to-download game called June's Journey. Now, June's Journey is a hidden object murder mystery game where you get to play June Parker, who goes on a mission to solve the murder of her sister and brother-in-law.
And we've joined the 30 million fans across the globe entranced with this game. I love finding the hidden objects and collecting clues, and we think you will too. Who doesn't want to play detective?
And the cool part is that each level there's a scene that is associated with the double murder set in the 1920s. And you have to use your powers of observation and your quick thinking to get through the details to unlock more clues and complete the levels to help you solve the mystery.
What I love about this game is how visual and detailed it is. It really brings you into June's journey and the case itself.
Now, Melissa, I don't know about you, but I have not stopped playing June's Journey since I downloaded it. And I just love the challenges, and I look forward to each new level.
I know, same. So download June's Journey free today on the Apple App Store or Google Play.
The threats did not stop. Did Brian make threats against you personally?
No, but Rick sent a text when this was all going on to Ash saying, "Give my brother what he wants."
Rick Lam is Brian's brother.
Something to the effect of, "You and your mother, I know where you live." And both Ash and I felt that this was enough of a threat that we reported each respectively to our local police precinct that this threat had been made, that I felt threatened by it.
The threat from Rick Lam was also noted in Ash's deposition.
What's the other communication from someone on behalf of Brian Lam that you thought was...
From Rick Lam's cell phone number, a text came in that said, "If your husband doesn't handle this in a way that makes me happy, I'll take care of him my way."
Was that produced during Mr. Lam's deposition the other day?
No.
Why not?
I need to go get the police report for it.
Did you file a police report?
I did.
This is frustrating to listen to because Ash Rowell knew what was coming. Maybe he didn't want to believe it, but he knew it was a possibility. And then you have his wife. If she feared her brothers, did she turn her head to the murder, or does she fear for her own life?
During Brian's deposition, he was asked about some vandalism to the warehouse and about his own brother's threats.
Are you responsible for the vandalism that was done to the premises of Duff Beer and Wine and McDuff after you were terminated?
Of course not. We get vandalized all the time down there. We put spray paint. I'm the one that go out there and clean the van when they spray paint and everything. It's a bad neighborhood.
And are you sure that your brother had nothing to do with it?
Like I said again, I don't think he had anything to do with it, but he's his own person. I don't know. I don't live with him. I don't think he did it.
You're aware that your brothers made threats?
No.
You're aware your brothers made threats to your sister?
No. I don't talk to my sister. That's because of the relationship we had here.
But you do talk to your brother?
I talk to my brother time and time.
He was here earlier today, right?
Mm-hmm.
You talked to him at lunch.
Yeah.
Did you talk to him about the threats he'd made?
No.
Why not?
Because, like I told you, I don't know. If he didn't make the threat, why we pin it on him? You have proof that he made that threat?
Did you ask him if he made a threat?
I don't bother to ask him.
It'd be wrong for him to be threatening Ash Rowell.
That's correct.
It'd be wrong to be threatening his family, correct?
Yeah.
It'd be wrong to be threatening your sister.
Yeah, but I think whether it's wrong or right, that's his own person. I can tell him. But when we would ask all the time, I told him, all the time, whether he's good or bad, he's my brother. I'm still going to talk to him.
But you're not going to talk to him about not threatening the Rounds.
That's his business. That's not mine. Had nothing to do.
So it's okay with you?
No, it's not okay. It's still not okay.
So, Melissa, after hearing that, what do you think of Brian denying any knowledge of Rick's threats?
Well, he's speaking in a way that I think many would to protect a sibling or loved one. Now, focus in on his wording. He is setting himself up to free any future accessory charge, and he certainly did not say no, he wasn't involved with 100% conviction, and that stood out.
After Brian left Duff Beer in 2009, it wasn't until 2011 when Charlotte, Ash, and Brian settled their dispute.
As you ladies know, you can sue a ham sandwich these days for anything. And so I had to defend that lawsuit, and we finally settled with Brian. And we thought he was out of our hair at that point.
But Brian wouldn't necessarily be out of their hair because Ash was married to Brian's sister, Leslie. In fact, it was Brian who introduced Ash and Leslie in 2005.
And what did you think of Leslie?
I liked her because Ash loved her, and I'm open to whatever my kids want to do with their lives. I'm open to that, and I didn't feel like I had a bad relationship with Leslie from the get-go. I liked her. I thought she was very kind, and I didn't have a problem when he said, we're going to get married, because it was obviously they were going to have a baby. I remember telling Ash, I think maybe you got the cart before the horse a little bit, but you can make these things work. So they met, I think, in like December. And by the next, I don't remember when, it was probably April or so, they were married. So it's kind of a whirlwind romance.
The case of Ash Rowell plays out like a textbook family drama. So to recap and make sure everyone is following, Ash and Charlotte Rowell had a successful beverage import and distribution company. Brian Lam was fired from Duff Beer in 2009 due to shady financial moves. He sued the Rowell family when they sold the company in 2011, claiming he was part owner, which we know he was not. Now, after a lengthy lawsuit with threats made during that time by Leslie's brothers, Brian and Rick, Charlotte settled with Brian Lam for $250,000.
With the sale of Duff Beer signed and the lawsuit with Brian over, Ash was really looking forward to time off to spend with his wife and kids. But all that would change in a matter of minutes, with one shot, one bullet. Houston PD original detective Phil Waters started to dig into Ash's past, looking for any clues that might point to who wanted Ash dead. When you reviewed the video from the depositions on the civil case between Brian Lam and Ash Rowell, was there anything in those conversations that really stood out to you as possibly being connected? That this civil suit or Brian Lam could be connected to the murder of Ash Rowell?
We subpoenaed, requested all of the documentation and case file for the civil suit that Brian Lam and Charlotte and Ash were all embroiled in. That was some interesting reading. And then as it turns out, I think Brian gets a nominal amount of money but then Ash and Charlotte turn around and sell the rights to the beer company, to the craft beer company, for a pretty good sum of money. And of course, one of the theories was is that Brian felt like he had been shorted on that deal, that they'd gotten away with it, and that was part of the revenge factor. And then there was a theory that it was Brian who may have wanted it done, but it was Rick who actually carried it out, because Rick was the one that was, again, kind of a loose cannon in the family. There were some, I think Ash's car had been burglarized, laptop stolen, that kind of thing. Ash had a couple of cell phones. So then there was the talk about an assistant that he had, a female that would go to him to different craft beer events and that kind of thing. And then there was the discussion that he was having an affair with her, and that Leslie had made the comment that if I ever catch you screwing around on me, I'll kill you, that kind of thing. We don't know if that was made in jest or if that was made in a serious manner. So a lot of information coming in that really it clouded the investigation more than it clarified.
Ash Rowell had been murdered, and detectives are ramping up their investigation. Did his past come back to haunt him? If so, what does that mean for Ash's mother, Charlotte? If they got Ash in 2013, do you think that there was possibly a hit put out on you, or a murder for hire put out on you as well, if this was some sort of business dealing?
I've thought about that. I don't think so. I mean, obviously, I'm always concerned for my own safety, but I think my punishment from these people was to watch and experience my own son's death. I mean, that's worse than being killed yourself.
We reached out to the Houston Police Department for comment, but they declined our interview request due to the case being an open and active investigation.
On the next episode of Killer Genes, part 2 of our investigation into the death of Ash Rowell.
Is Ash's murderer someone in his own family? You and your husband were potential suspects. Did you know that?
They scattergunned. Yeah, I absolutely know that. I mean, they scattergunned everyone.
Or someone even closer. Do you think Leslie knows more than she's leading on to?
That's a difficult question to answer.
And is money the root of all evil?
I think I even interrupted and said, why would you need a life insurance policy for $1 million?
Charlotte told me that she had found that Leslie and possibly Ash were actually embezzling from the company.
This has been Killer Genes.
Follow us at mudhousemedia.com.